Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Frederick with the Stretch to Win Institute at stretchtowin.com. And I'm here today because you have asked for it. You guys, I started a thread on my Facebook about SMFR, self-myofascial release, or however you want to call it. And you guys were out there really wanted to hear from some of the top leaders in this world or in this field. So I have with me today, I'm so excited, Cassidy Phillips, an old friend and colleague going way back. And Cassidy is the founder, creator of TriggerPoint Performance. And I'm going to let him basically introduce himself and say hello. Welcome, Cassidy.
Hello there. How are you?
Good.
It's funny. TriggerPoint Performance. It originated as TriggerPoint Technologies, which you know it as, and it evolved into TriggerPoint Performance as we got more involved in the sport performance world. I started TriggerPoint 13 and a half, almost 14 years ago, and now we are in about 86 plus countries around the world, and we have an educational platform that supports each of those countries, along with product distribution.
Well, tell me about that's awesome. And I kind of been following you on some level, but I mean, I've known you for a long time, and I got certified.
That's right.
When it was TPT, way back when. So what was it like back then when you started? It's a different world. 13 years ago was a different
Yeah.
world. So what was it like back then? Was anyone rolling on anything back then so much?
Feldenkrais was, I think, the first that really, had anything to do with the foam roller, but they were using it for a different purpose. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, I didn't create a foam roller first. I created products that would mirror the feeling of an actual hand.
That's exactly why I heard about that. And Ann and I, because we're manual therapists, we're like, we got it. Because I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. And that was the groundbreaking side of it all. And there was no foam roller even at that time, but I didn't know about foam rolling. It was a self-seeking, prophecy to figure out how to take care of myself. I didn't start the company to go out and conquer the world. I started the company to conquer my own body. And I was dealing with just chronic pain to the level of I was doing vitamin C IVs, glutathione injections, B12 injections, over 300 injections of procaine into my body, just trying to find somebody to take care of me. It was really, I was as selfish as it got. I needed somebody to take care of me so that I wouldn't have to deal with the pain that I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. Now, the reality, as you know, I had to stop and say, in order for me to take care of me, I have to accept who I am today. And 13 and a half years ago, 14 years ago, 16 years ago, I was truly cocky. 14 years ago, I was losing my cockiness because my body was breaking down and we couldn't figure out what was going on. So I did every sport I could. And then to go from traveling around the world, surfing and jumping out of planes and doing all kinds of crazy cool stuff to all of a sudden not being able to move, I gained what I call athletic-induced depression. I hit the bottom of the bottom.
Diagnosed with what they call today and back then fibromyalgia.
Yes.
Probably don't know that much more today than they did back then. They know a little bit more, but it's still kind of a mystery illness, disease, whatever you want to call it, disorder.
It's a catch-all.
It really is a catch-all. And that, when you hear how a client has fibromyalgia syndrome or FMS or whatever they call it, it's like, oh boy, I'm in.
Most people, they run. They're like, I don't want to deal with this.
And so, in a nutshell, did you guys actually create tools to heal your own body? Is that how you started this?
Yeah, I think, when I was saying fibromyalgia back then, truly nobody knew what or how to deal with that. I had seen a doctor in Atlanta, Georgia, and he said, listen, we've done everything we can. There's a thing called fibromyalgia that is a myofascial dysfunction. And I'm getting some weird feedback all of a sudden. Are you?
Oh, is it better now?
Let's see. Yes, it's better now.
Sorry, I put a piece of paper over the keyboard and it scratched it a little bit. Wow.
Oh, okay.
Sensitive. That's really cool.
Yeah. So the point of that was, I saw a doctor. I'd been seeing this guy, and he treated people for cancer alternatively, and that's why I went to see him, because I realized I had to take care of me, but I wanted to pursue every aspect possible for somebody else to take care of me. And by the end of it all, he said, listen, you've got this thing called fibromyalgia. We're just learning about it. You're screwed. He said, you're ultimately going to deal with chronic pain for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And I said, that doesn't work for me. I appreciate the thought, but I am going to figure out a way to take care of myself. You brush your teeth every day. You can take care of your body every day. You just have to look at the most simplistic application of use. And a manual therapist is the best, right? If you can get a manual therapist, and if you can get a manual therapist on your body every day, man, don't worry about it. You got enough money to take care of yourself. You don't need any products.
Yeah, if you could.
Yes. Yeah. So for me, the first thing that I did was actually I cut up a wetsuit, and I cut off the legs, I cut off the arms, I cut off the torso, so that there were lines where basically the joints transferred into another joint, but I would wear that to heat up the body.
Right.
And then I would roll out on, first all I had was a ball, the TP massage ball. And I would use that post wearing this wetsuit. And then I'd actually, when I go and ride or run, because I was trying to do an Ironman at the time, and I would ride with these wetsuit legs on my body, just because the problem was, once I would become sedentary, I would stick together. If I went out and trained and went into air condition, I'd stick together. It was this problem of I had to keep this liquid force within the muscle on a regular basis. Otherwise, I was going to be biomechanically challenged because of the lack of tissue tolerance. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the first thing. And then I looked at, okay, my left leg, I had a lot of neurological problems. The left side of my body had gone numb, and I was like, there's got to be something going on there. And then I looked at the way that I sat in the car. I lived in LA for 10 years. I lived in Atlanta. Both have horrible traffic. And I realized that my leg was leaning out towards a door panel. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, let's think about that. L45 is going to be impinged. Soleus is going to be shortened. Sciatic nerve is going to be jeopardized. I need to biomechanically position myself properly in the car, and then maybe that'll help. Mm-hmm. So I put a block in between the car door and my leg, not to allow that external rotation of my hip to occur.
Right.
And I saw some benefit. Mm-hmm. But then I created what we call now the TP ball, the TP massage ball. And that was really to mirror the feeling of, an incredible therapist in Atlanta, Glass, is his last name. He's a chiropractor there. And I'm like, man, I just got to be able to do what he does to me on my own. So I would leverage that ball in between a wall, in between the floor, anywhere that I could get it to move the external limb through everyday ranges of motion, right, while I was building pressure into the ball.
And trying to mimic his hand, the therapist.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
Right.
And so I started to see results because I was doing this on a daily basis that nobody could believe.
And you didn't get it from other places besides your therapist, your chiro, Mr. Glass, who actually did soft tissue technique. You won't find a lot of chiros doing that particular soft tissue technique either.
Yeah.
So nothing else really helped because you did other kinds of manual therapy I'm aware of, and acupuncture. So none of those other therapies you're saying did as much in terms of lasting relief as did this actual ball.
Yeah, no, I mean they're
a lot. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, well, and I did, I did everything.
Yeah,
and I mean everything. And it was ironic that the simplicity of manual therapy was ultimately the greatest return, mm-hmm. And it was the least investment.
Yeah.
Because if we're looking at at sheer dollars, I mean, to get a massage isn't that expensive when you equate it to going to see the doctor.
Right.
But when you try to do it on a daily basis, it gets pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And so, fortunately, Dr. Glass was one of those guys that said, listen, show me what you're doing, and let me give you advice on what you may do differently. But he was flabbergasted at the return that I was getting from the daily use of it all.
Right.
So fortunately, I had a very supportive chiro at the time. But the bottom line was I created the products, specific product for a specific need. The footballer came next, and that's not for your foot. It was for the soleus to regain dorsiflexion in your foot.
So the evolution of the products in terms of the ball helped certain things, and you realize you need to develop other things for other regions of the body, or
yes, well that was the biggest problem that I had with a foam roller. As time went on, all of a sudden, once we came out with TriggerPoint, everybody started coming out with these foam rollers, and they're like, hey, listen, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you're like, how? You're trying to use one product for the entire body. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense. You need specific products for specific needs so that you make sure you penetrate the muscle belly at the time. That's really what we were trying to do in the beginning, is reset the muscle spindle. Mm-hmm. And while doing that, we were addressing the fascia.
So while you're talking about that, is it possible for you to sort of list what products you have that address specific anatomy or need, let's say a condition? So I'll give you an example. Do you have products that are specific to large muscles versus small muscles, tendons versus muscle belly, in between muscles versus right on the muscle, any number of those things from an anatomical point of view? Do you sort of prescribe, use this tool for this part of the body, this tool for that part of the body, it's better, and or condition? Okay, this is for trigger points, and this is for these conditions, this is for scar tissue, or you can use it on anything. So do you mind going into a little detail about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when we started, it was very specific, and you remember, you and Ann came down to Austin and took one of our classes, and I was a drill sergeant when it comes to application of use, because I knew what gave the greatest rate of return.
Right.
And so, we were filling rooms with whether it be a PT, a doctor, a chiro. We weren't heavily involved in personal training at the time.
Right.
And it was astounding the return that we got on that investment. So, the TP ball was, very specific. We didn't use it anywhere except, we would use it in the calf so that we could get to the soleus or the post tip through the calf. We'd use the ball into the piriformis, and externally rotate the leg, distal movement. We use it into pec major minor. We stayed away from the obvious, which was, okay, you use it in the middle of your back, up against a car, because it was obvious.
Right.
You were going to do that anyway.
Yeah. So
when I created the footballer and said, okay, I want that to be designed to go after the soleus post-tib region to gain dorsiflexion in the foot, we already knew you were going to use it on your foot.
Right.
So we're not going to educate you there. We want to give you something that was less obvious. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the big things was plantar fasciitis back in the day.
Right. And,
I said, okay, is plantar fasciitis post-tibial tendonitis, or is it the plantar fascia in the bottom of your foot,
right,
or is it FHL, DL creating dysfunction? What exactly is going on? Well, if you're not in there, you don't know.
Yeah.
So we have to go after the muscle tissue that ultimately controls that foot in order to define or redefine foot functionality.
So that the person would actually do it. Basically, it's a self-assessment, because as you're rolling, you're finding areas that you didn't even know to be contributing to the actual issue. That's my cat's tail in the screen. I told you I was, for listeners, I told Cassie in our pre-interview conversation that I was known as the Pussy Whisperer, which a lot of you already know, but that's another story.
Oh my, yes.
But anyway, that whole self-assessment stuff I love, because in the first book I wrote all about self-assessment, and it involves rolling. It involves on some level rolling,
yeah,
to discover more about your body through the experience. And
well, it's interesting. I just read an article. Somebody sent it to me, and they said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And it was a guy that was totally putting down foam rolling, totally putting down any kind of myofascial release kind of stuff, because you're just rolling back and forth without a purpose. And I mean, this guy had a big opinion about it. And so somebody asked me what I think about it, and I said, I don't think he's that wrong. Everything has to have a purpose. And, at the end of the day, our 422 programming is there because we want someone to follow a program.
Right.
We don't want you just generically getting on something and rolling on it and giving you a false sense of security.
Right.
Give you programming, give you, as you said, assessments. Do something before, do something after. Look at the range of motion that you have. But it's you've got to get into that tissue in order to what we say defrag the muscle so that you can get greater range of motion.
Yeah, I mean, just like any good program of assessment, which is what you have offered us, and I'm sure still offer, is you assess a movement or how you feel, the condition of your body, the muscle, whatever you want to talk about, before you treat it. Self-treat it by, let's say, rolling on whatever, and then you do a reassessment. If you're better, you're better.
Yeah.
If it sticks, you're even better.
Yes.
If it doesn't stick, well, that's another thing. We'll talk about that a little bit. If something doesn't stick, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Or we get talking about controversies, which we started talking about the person who disagreed with foam rolling or without a purpose. Yeah, you need an assessment. Now you have a purpose, right? I want to get rid of this pain. You identify maybe a source of it. You get rid of it. You retest. It's gone. You did something positive for the pain.
Yeah.
You're getting rid of it. So that's with a purpose.
Yes. Well, let me interject on that real quick. You said rolling.
Yeah. Pressing.
We never rolled.
Yeah. I shouldn't use that word.
Yeah. When you took the class, it was we are moving the body. And we're moving the device to one's going one direction,
right.
The body's going in an opposing direction, in small movements, very specific movements, in order to allow the tissue to respond.
Right. Pressure, shear.
What's that?
Pressure and shear.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that is a manual therapy. Basically, deep tissue work. A lot of deep tissue work, a lot of manual therapy, a lot of Rolfing is pressure and shear.
Yeah, I'm not a rocket scientist.
Yeah,
I didn't create this out of.
But you recreated the manual therapy experience for the self.
Yes, that's exactly
what's really cool, because that was your goal.
Yes, that was 100%.
Yeah, and you did
what the goal was. Now it's interesting. In 2008. That's when our economy really started to suffer.
Yeah.
And there were other foam rollers, the hollows, open cell foam rollers out there. And everybody said, well, why don't you just make a foam roller? And I said, it gives you a false sense of security. A foam roller is made to float. It's not made to massage the body.
Yeah.
And we came out with the grid, the hollow foam roller.
So moving to the grid.
Yes.
What is that for in terms of particular? Is it for every part of your body? Is it more dominant or a bigger player for certain parts, not for others?
It is. Now let's talk about it first, and then I'll talk about application of use. It is a hollow foam roller, as most people know. It's got a hard core on the inside. It's got EVA on the outside, but it's got a pattern to it. And this pattern, if you look at our grid and you look at a meat tenderizer, they're very similar. And the whole point of that is that when you roll over the grid, we wanted the blood and oxygen to have a way to be distributed as you're rolling over it. So it was originally made to be a core workout device.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't want to make a foam roller. So I'm like, well, how do I mentally get over this? And I said, well, we'll make it a smart core, self-myofascial release and core work, because it's ergonomically designed to do anything that you would do on a stability ball, you can do on our grid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, the industry had started to catch up with us at that point. So foam rolling, nobody had engineered a foam roller to be a quote-unquote massage device.
Right.
They had taken foam rollers from other industries and said, okay, we're going to make this a massage device.
Yeah. I see the difference. Right.
So it took a lot of time what's that?
That's a big difference.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it took a lot of time to engineer the foam to respond the way that we needed it to, but also to make sure that circulation was being generated as you rolled over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it is a catch-all product.
Right.
Because at the time where I think our kits at the time, let's say our hip and lower back or I can't remember what the names of the kits were then, but they were about $150 on average in 2008. And so $40 versus $150 when the economy is suffering, people really gravitated towards the grid at the time. And it looked like nothing they had ever seen.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, it was a cost-effective measure to keep yourself healthy, but we hoped that they would then go from the grid and get onto the TriggerPoint products.
Right.
Now, since that time, last year, I can't remember what month it was, we had over 1 million grids in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was a huge success, and you saw everyone in sport using our grid. And, so much so that our patents just came through several weeks ago.
Perfect.
And, so most every foam roller that's hollow with a pattern on it in the marketplace, I believe, is coming off the market, which is great for TriggerPoint. But the idea of engineering, making something specific, making sure that you get circulation, stayed in line with my original mission.
Okay.
And that was to empower people to be able to take care of themselves and do things that they never thought possible.
And again, just in terms of application, it can be used anywhere on the body? Is it mostly for the back?
It can be used anywhere on the body. And we once again have education behind that so that you get some mashing and some shearing and once again, we're going to duplicate now what you do as a manual therapist. And then Mike Leahy, who's a great guy that created ART, active release technique,
Sure.
which is a lot of pin and stretch techniques.
Yeah.
We apply those same principles to the grid, just like we do with the TriggerPoint products.
Got it.
So the product is one thing, but the application of use is something totally different. And that's where we really want people to concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's what I wanted.
Sure. So with the application of use, is it pretty much now the person doing it themselves, right? Because you used to actually teach you were teaching us in our class how to use, let's say, the ball as a tool that you use in your hand and you apply it to the person's body.
Yes.
For a variety of reasons, and you did it in a variety of ways. Is that
yes?
Do you use?
And it's funny because then we're talking 05.
Yeah.
10 years ago. It was interesting back then. There were so many people like you that were influencers at the time that really wanted to gravitate towards something that could empower their clients, but also be used on them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the industry made a real change when insurance started to really influence healthcare.
Right.
And so there's so many manual therapies out there, but you just don't hear about the practitioner going and getting as much continuing education as they did then. And I think it may have to do with they got to work so hard to make money today, whereas back then the money was a little easier to make.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which allowed them to go and get all this incredible education on a regular basis. So we're actually going back to that model. We've got some people in house that are working on our clinical education, because I believe that most practices are going to go to cash-based practices, and they're going to be able to get back to the care that they really want to do in the first place.
That's awesome. So just as a recap with tools, it sounds almost like you can basically use any tool on any part of your body, because we all have different types of bodies. We have dense, some people have dense connective tissue, some have more dense, like on offensive lineman is so dense. You talk to any manual therapist, it's like, dude, I need 2 hours to work on you.
Yeah.
Just to get my hand to sink into your tissue takes more time than someone else because of your dense connective tissue. Versus, so I can imagine some people just trying out, it's great to have a kit of tools, and you're like, this roller's not working, or this ball's not so good right here. Oh yeah, this hollow, the hollow core, what do you call that? Hollow?
The grid.
The grid works better versus the ball could work better. So I guess you just have to experiment with a kit of some sort of different tools on different parts of your body. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Would that be a correct statement versus saying only use the ball for your foot and your calf, only use the grid for your back and your quads, only do this and only do that?
So what I would say is, if you're going after biomechanics, if we're spot checking, multiple areas of your body, I'll agree with you there. When I had something to prove, man, I was going to tell you exactly what product to use where.
Yeah.
And you know that to be true. Now, as I've gotten older, and more experienced, I still have very big opinions when it comes to redefining biomechanics. But if we're talking about pain management, there are so many people out there in this world now that their tissues are jeopardized because of so many different areas of their life, whether it be the office, whether it be the food, whether it be their home life. And so there are sensitivities that are amazing to me. And so therefore, you can't expect the same pressure or size of a device for one person as to your NFL guy. Right. You can probably beat the shit out of your NFL guy, and he's going to love it every step of the way because he lives that life.
Well, let's get into that. The controversy about mash and smash versus be soft on yourself or be gentle. What are your comments on that?
So there's I'm going to address it in two ways. Everybody thinks that I have a big opinion from a product distribution perspective in the world. And from a self-care side of things, I don't think there's a bigger company than TriggerPoint out there. So I'm very proud of that. When it comes to care and patient care, there are some incredible practitioners out there that have programs that are very effective to the end consumer. There's Jill Miller, who has, I believe it's called Yoga Tune-Ups. There's Sue Hitzman, who has Melt. There's Kelly Starrett, who's got a very aggressive style of mashing and CrossFit, tear up the tissue kind of mentality. And then there's a lot of people that are coming up with their own theories now based off of those of us that started the industry, and now everybody is a myofascial expert.
Right.
Especially in the personal training space.
Mm-hmm.
So they're once again, it goes back to their specific products for specific needs.
Right.
Sue's got this incredible style of therapy that I believe is incredible for the older population. The softer side of life that just want to feel better. Now, there's a lot of neurological stuff that's going on with what she does, and there are it's a softer roller by nature. It's a support roller as well. So I think it's awesome what she's doing. There's a lot of women that take her courses, and I think that we all get caught up in that we have a solution for everyone.
Right.
And don't question me about my solution for everyone. And it's just not possible. It's just not possible. And so there are specific programs out there for specific people in this world that if they get introduced to one of these types of therapies, they're going to see amazing results. And that's not just TriggerPoints. That's all these others as well.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I mean, I totally agree with you. One product is not for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, and I once again, when I'm trying to win, I have an opinion, and there are a bunch of people out there that would say I'm not the nicest guy in the world when it comes to business. We're not talking about business right now. We're talking about care.
Yes, exactly.
And healthcare is now self-care in our society.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. All the points that you made were good because I pretty much say the same thing in manual therapy. There's not one technique for everyone, and you got to have a mixed tool bag. But also, it's your exposure to your demographic. If I just see professional athletes, that's my tunnel vision. I really can't speak on anybody else. And so what techniques I use on them, they have a high tolerance for pain, for deep pressure, and they ask for it and they want it. And so on and so forth, which I can't use with a population with chronic pain. I have to have a totally different approach. So, if a person has success, whether you use a tool or your hands on a specific group of people, it's not like you saw everybody in the world. You cannot say it applies to everybody.
Yeah.
So your point is very well taken.
I appreciate it.
In terms of we talked about opinions and people having an opinion, and you have opinions, and I have my own opinions. What about science? They have their own opinion. So-called based on science opinion, evidence-based research. Is there anything out there on myofascial release, self-myofascial release, with these tools? Like, has your company or anybody that you know have done any research in this field?
Yeah, there's been with it's interesting with the TriggerPoint products, which are the grid and now the whole family of products there. So I kind of separate the two. And, when we talk about TriggerPoint and application of use, it's simple. Everybody says they're deep tissue products. Well, they're as deep as you want them to be, and they're as soft as you want them to be. It depends on how much pressure you want to build into the tissue.
Sure.
And so I can go back and look at the scientific evidence of manual therapy and apply that to all of those products.
Right.
And I have no problem doing that because that's what we're ultimately trying to duplicate.
Right.
Now, when we get into the foam rolling world, man, I mean, there's so many people that are doing science, adding scientific-based quote-unquote evidence. And, we did a study at University of Texas that said our footballer creates more circulation and adds greater range of motion to the foot and ankle when used than a regular foam roller. Okay, well, that's great, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist just to figure that out.
No, it doesn't. But until some people see the evidence, they're not going to accept the statements that anybody.
Yes, and those are the same people that are very cautious in life, and so they're probably pretty boring at the end of the day. I don't know that I'd hang out with them too much. I'd drive them crazy. Because if I feel better and I look better, I'm better. And, the idea of application of use, I was able to, I think when we came to see you the first time, I was at a place called Athletes Performance working with, the best of the best out there. And then, we sponsor IMG academies, and I've gone down there, and I can take a 40 and I can make it faster. Mm-hmm. I can, take a upper hamstring issue or a sciatic issue. We're not in there, so we don't ultimately know.
Right.
Redefine their movement pattern, and next thing you know, they're moving faster. And one particular case, it's online. When I was working with this guy, his career was over, and he ended up getting picked up by New York shortly after I worked with him, and he was ecstatic. So, did we have a scientist there that was rating everything through that process? No.
Right.
Is science necessary? And I'm getting that feedback again. I think science is critical for anything that is an application for internal relief. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the manual therapies of today, do I think hopping on a foam roller is going to help somebody? Yes. Can I tell you who that person is? It's somebody that's not real active.
Right.
It's somebody that needs some lubrication in the tissue. Mm-hmm. Are you going to use that same approach for an NFL guy? Absolutely not. Are you going to use the same approach for an endurance athlete? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. So if we really start to break all this down, I think science is important, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all, because I can get paid for theory, which is called science, because any scientific study is going to be biased.
Right. Well, I agree. There are limitations in science, and there is a dark side of science where a study came out in the Wall Street Journal, and I've been promoting this information because it's important for the public to know that it's been determined that most in the drug world, most studies are not reproduced. And in order for something to be valid and reliable, you should do the same exact test 3 times and get the same exact outcome. There is nobody in the world, even the multi-billion-dollar companies, that will spend the money to do the same exact test 3 times. Mm-hmm. Once they get an outcome they like, that's it.
Yeah.
So they're defeating the scientific method, because the scientific method says basically a rule of 3. So, and on not only that, pardon me, just to complete the thought, more than half, when they do retest exactly using the same parameters, cannot be reproduced.
Yeah.
More than half. So, in my opinion, when reading about the study of the studies, the study that more than half is not valid and reliable, when they use the scientific method to test the scientific method, it's more than half. It's a flip of the coin. Then how valid and reliable is science? It's not as valid and reliable as we think, and certainly not as more valid and more important than anecdote, than reliable practice-based evidence, where you do a movement pattern is faulty, you improve it with with the tool, using the tool, and the athlete gets up and runs a 40 a lot faster. That's practice-based evidence. There's evidence that they got better because that's the only thing you did.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe.
And it's interesting to take the focus off of the product and go, I believe that he ran the 40 better because of the MCT, Myofascial Compression Techniques, which is what I created, versus the product. I think that there are so many different applications out there, and there's so many products out there in the market now. What we're trying to do is we're trying to govern people from getting hurt.
Right.
And so what I say, like, go ahead and use MCT techniques with a golf ball. Bad idea.
Right.
You have a great opportunity to hurt yourself. I'm gonna.
Same thing. Tennis ball.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say tennis ball. At least you're not gonna hurt yourself.
Yeah.
We know you're not gonna hurt yourself with a tennis ball, but it's still made of air, so it's gonna compress, and so you're not gonna get the nucleus of really what you're trying to do because it's gonna go concave in that spot. But when it comes to science and our world today, there's a lot of ask for forgiveness later by all those scientists that said, this drug is going to do exactly what you want it to.
Right.
Yeah. You turn on late night TV, and if you suffer from X, Y, and Z from taking such and such drug, call now for the class action suit. And you go, well, but I thought they had it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, listen, we've really made strides globally with personal trainers, and there are some incredible personal trainers out there right now that are pushing the boundaries when it comes to movement, application of movement, and the soft tissue solutions to support that.
Right.
And I'm very proud to say that, we have classes globally, but so do so many other manual techniques that are now being seen as a positive in the personal training space versus when I started, I remember I talked to IDEA about going to present, and they said, we don't want to have anything to do with quote unquote massage.
Right.
And now the conference is next week, IDEA World Conference, there are so many self-care products and programs within the curriculum. And I think it's great because you got to understand there's so many clients out there in this world. Mm-hmm. And there are so many different ways to address soft tissue needs. And if the world was like it is today, 15 years ago when I was going through the worst of what I was going through,
right,
I would have never started a company.
Yeah.
I would have found a solution. So I think it's awesome that so many people are out there wanting to help other people. And I'm very frustrated with those that just want to make a product,
right,
and peddle a product.
Sure, exactly. Well, one last thing about controversy is there's been some, I don't know the exact source, but if it's a rumor, it's a rumor. It's not a rumor. They say it's based on some sort of scientific conclusion, and I don't even know if it's a study. Doesn't matter. But there's people coming out there saying there's no such thing as a trigger point. Like trigger points. Have you heard that? Have you heard anyone say
I've
don't
heard?
Exist?
Yeah, that. Yes, I have.
Yeah, and since we're both, I don't know if I'm not informed enough to necessarily speak on where this all comes from. And I can just say my own opinions about it, but I don't know where it's coming from. Like what is why are you or whoever saying this based on what, and does it matter anyway?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, because if you define the reaction of the muscle differently and use a different word for it, it's like, what are we talking about here? Well, but I'm thinking, though, I'll just throw this out there.
Yeah.
There's a system of thinkers that everything's brain and nervous system. And therefore, let's say a trigger point, it could be that the trigger point is really when you change the brain, the trigger point goes away. So it's really not from it's not a local issue. It's a central nervous system issue. So therefore, and I'm just putting this out as a theory where they could be coming from. Therefore, the trigger point is of central nervous system origin. And if you address the central nervous system, the trigger point goes away. Like one example would be when people are under anesthesia, the question is, do those trigger points go away? I don't know. And the second thing would be if a person dies, has anyone ever found a trigger point in a cadaver? But you know what? For me, it's like, so what? If they disappear, they're dead. That's a good solution to get rid of trigger points. Kill yourself.
Yeah.
Well, if you're live, you have your trigger point. So something animating it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I got to work with Thomas Myers on some fresh cadavers.
Sure.
And move that tissue around, and clearly you could feel restricted areas because they were still fresh.
Yeah, you've been interested in that.
Yeah, and so scar tissue, we know.
Oh, I've seen it in cadavers.
Yes, and so my theory, and I really don't talk about this a lot. So Chris, good job for pulling this out of me. When I started TriggerPoint, I had a problem with trigger points. I thought it was a marketable term and potentially not a reality within the muscle.
Wow.
Yes. I believe that we have scar tissue and we have, myofascial dysfunctions, which ultimately are defined as a trigger point today. But with fibromyalgia, they said, if you have 8, I forget what it was, 12 or whatever areas along this trigger point chart, if you're sore in any of these areas, you have fibromyalgia.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like,
it was 11 or 12. I think it was 11 points out of 18.
Yeah. And I'm like, come on. You push the right way and you're going to feel uncomfortable in every one of those spots.
Thank you.
So I have a problem with that. So when the idea of a trigger point is there is dysfunction within the muscle that does radiate pain to other areas in the body, and whether there's nerve entrapment, whether there's myofascial dysfunction, or whether, it's an anomaly, who cares? If you're not in there, you don't know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But what we do know is that a manual style of therapy can give freedom to a dysfunctional area so that the tissues can slide and glide after the fact and the body can move more freely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just like your teeth, the plaque's going to build back up.
Right. So let's nail this down a little bit with mechanism, because you do believe, because you said something about much earlier in this conversation about when you put on that suit, you said something about your body sticking. Okay, not everybody out there knows what that means.
Okay.
But I think it's getting back to what you're just talking about, where whatever it is will stiffen back up, tighten back up, glue back up.
Mm-hmm.
Use your favorite word of choice. What's your favorite word of choice, and what does that really mean is happening? You think on a muscular level. Go to any level you want to go, whether it's cellular or not, or just the muscle, or the fascia, or the layers. What do you think is happening that the tools that you design relieve? Yeah, let's just.
Mm-hmm. So I'll take it from what's going on in there.
Yeah.
And I've used the same term, for 15 years. I'm not in there, so I don't know.
Okay.
Is it a cellular level? Is it a muscle spindle level? Is it a fascial level? Well, fascia is unbiased. It's everywhere. And I've had 2 abdominal obstructions. I had a fibrous band wrapped around my small intestines, and then I had the scar tissue wrapped around the intestines a second time.
Wow.
Dehydration played a big key in all of that. I had an eating disorder as a kid because of that. I was a national triathlete. I didn't know that it was the only way that I could get waste product out. So my point is that I had an abdominal obstruction. I had a fibrous band wrapped around my small intestines, yet I had what was perceived as anorexia and bulimia. But it was the only way that I could get the food or the product out of my system so that I could still live.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And so if we as an industry are going to really define what's happening within that tissue, good for you. Because I sure as hell don't know. And you can go to any doctor and they're going to go, well, it could be a number of things. And you go, well, but you're a doctor. You're supposed to know what's going on in here. Said, I got to get in there to see it.
Yeah.
So what our responsibility is to come up with a solution-based program to mitigate simple soft tissue solutions to create a more biomechanically sound body. And if it doesn't work, you need to go to a doctor.
So if you don't know what it is, and no one really knows what it is that's causing restrictions, let's say. Yeah. What do you tell when you educate people what it is?
Well, I believe that dehydration is evil. Okay. Dehydration is going to shut down a muscle. It's going to shut down any tissue. It's 70+% of our body is liquid.
As a therapist, I have to agree with you from a clinical, anecdotal 27 years of experience working on people. I have to tell you that's true because when I tell an athlete, you went drinking last night, didn't you? And you didn't drink enough water? They said yes. Mm-hmm. How did I know that? I've never been wrong when I've said that. And I caught a fair number of them the day after drinking. Yeah. They were dehydrated. Yes. And the difference is the tissue feels like beef jerky. Yep. But I know I know their body. I know what it feels like hydrated, and I know what it feels like dehydrated. So I have to agree with you on that score. So let me ask you a question. Do you remember every place that you've been hit in your body? No, of course not. Okay. Well, then you can't tell me where the waste product sits for a future trigger point or myofascial dysfunction or scar tissue or any of that. You are correct. I could not tell you. Yeah, nor can anybody else. So you bump into a table, guess what? There's a contusion within the body. True. So what happens with that? Well, if you don't hydrate properly, guess what? That is a future opportunity for a dysfunctional area for soft tissue to slide and glide through it. So for a client who doesn't know about science or anything and doesn't know about manual therapy, a regular person, you say, hey, that's where you stick? Right? Yes. So it's tangible to a regular person. Like, well, they want to understand what's going on in my body. What do you tell a regular person? That's where you stick? Your tissues stick together? What I say is that is where it's interesting because I always go back to the movement pattern. If I'm looking for more foot functionality, I go, okay, let's look at your peroneals, let's look at your soleus, let's look at your antib, let's find out where those restrictions are, and then what you'll yield is a greater return on the foot positioning. So if we want to get you into the ball of the foot, the soleus has to be able to lengthen in order to allow that to occur. Got it. So it's interesting because I don't spot check. I go after, if I'm going to educate and hopefully, there's a group of people that want to listen to that education. And you go, hey, let's talk about knee flexion and dorsiflexion. Dorsiflexion, knee flexion are the same thing. It's one's open chain, one's closed chain. Mm-hmm. And then you go, so let's look at all the muscles that will restrict your ability to move through that movement pattern. So now we can find trigger points throughout the body as defined by the industry standard. But what I want to do is I want to look at the muscle group versus a specific muscle. Right. I want to look at the muscle group versus a one restricted area. Mm-hmm. So when you say group, so you feel like the problems lie within the group? Yes. Well, I mean, you're really I'm assuming you're coming from the motor learning almost standpoint or perspective where we don't learn to move with individual muscles. We learn to move with patterns, and patterns involve groups of muscles. Yes. Would that be correct? Absolutely. So therefore, the problem in movement a movement analysis that you would do on an athlete or a regular person is the group. What is the primary group issue?
It's got to be an open chain and a closed chain movement.
And it's not a fascial like line like Tom Myers talks. You're not talking like a whole.
Well, I think that it does come down to a certain amount of that, what I call myofascial opposition, and which is an easy way to say, if you don't have an antib, the soleus isn't going to function properly.
Right. Well,
so you got to.
And they found connective tissue of agonists in the antagonists. In other words, the connective tissue, as you know, probably from the dissection or from Tom Myers or from your background, the current thinking in fascial research, dissection, Antonio and Carlos Stecco, that are research leaders in human anatomy today.
Yeah.
They're talking about finding key fascial tissue in one muscle group entering and therefore affecting the muscle of the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
So it changes the thinking where if you contract your bicep, your triceps relaxing. Not necessarily. It's not relaxing and not doing anything. It has to also be somewhat activated to deal with the fact that it's dealing with possibly also just length. It's a lengthening contraction. Obviously, there's an eccentric contraction to deal with the fact that its neighbor, its neurological neighbor, the agonist of the antagonist, is, let's say, lifting a dumbbell. The tricep has to be doing something, not like the old way of thinking. It's letting go. It's relaxing.
Well, so
simply because it's an antagonist. Because if it doesn't, reciprocal innervation, inhibition, the old neurological thinking, where one muscle lets go in order to let another muscle activate, the new thinking is not so much.
Yeah, well, 1972 called, and they want that theory back. That's simply saying, in my book, is most of the tests were done in an open chain movement.
Oh, yeah. So,
now, when you put that dumbbell in your hand, it's a closed chain movement. It's just a different way of looking at it. So in order to stabilize weight or a closed chain movement, guess what?
It all tenses up.
It all tenses up.
Well, you tense your fascial sleeves.
Yes. It's the whole network. I mean, it's you got these fulcrums and levers, and we want to allow them to efficiently move through life. Well, it's the muscular structure that's going to allow it to happen.
Right.
Now, there's that theory that if you pull all the fascia out of your body,
right,
the fascia can stand on its own. I want to know who was the example there, who volunteered for that scientific evidence.
Yeah.
But the reality is, as I say, the muscles are to act independent yet as one, just as we are as self-care providers. So at the end of the day, all your muscles have to be active in order to move in a sound manner.
So when you're looking at the group, like hip flexors, you're not going to – the thinking is now, for you, it's not an isolated one trigger point in one muscle that you're looking for.
Correct.
You're looking at the whole group.
Yes.
So you're looking for dysfunction in the whole group.
Yes.
Basically. Search and destroy, whatever.
Yeah, and that's why, like when you're rolling through the quads, we redefined it from when you took it. It used to be up an inch, back down half an inch. Now we stay within these zones so that everybody can follow it. Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4. And then as you roll through it, then we shake the leg side to side. Then we put that distal movement into the leg. Our level 2 is then we get this mashing and shearing, as you talked about before, in a very specific movement pattern, so that we're going after the whole muscle. If you're dehydrated, you're not only dehydrating in that one little spot, you're dehydrating in a body centric way.
So when you say zones, does it have to do with what does zones mean? Like, how do you define a zone?
We're just so if we're talking about rectus femoris vasilateralis, we're just breaking it into 4 different zones, depending upon how long your femur is or not. So
Okay.
we're just making sure that you're addressing the entire muscle every time that you do.
Are the zones another name for categorizing muscles within a group?
Nah.
Oh.
It's just a simple way to say, okay, zone 1, zone 2. It's a great graphic on a screen.
Okay.
Because you can say, hey, I want you to roll your quads up 1 inch, back down ½ inch. We know you're going to eventually get to the top of your quad.
Right.
It may take forever.
Yeah.
Because everybody's leg is different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an easier way to educate the population.
Cool. Well, what's the future of TriggerPoint Performance in terms of, is there anything, I know you can't share with us any trade secrets, like something on the drawing table right now, but is there any future? Is anything going to change? Where do you see the industry going in 5 years?
Wow. Well, first I'll talk about TriggerPoint. So I was fortunate to sell TriggerPoint in October of last year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was a great deal in a multitude of ways. I'm working for the parent company. All I get to do is geek out on biomechanics and product.
Love it.
So they took all the other stuff away. And then I actually am fortunate enough to go out and look at other companies to acquire.
You're working on you're just using your unique abilities.
Yes. My
finally, right?
Yes. Now it's interesting. You mentioned Kyle earlier when we were talking offline. Kyle Stoll. He actually is taking our current programming and teaching that in a much more. He's a clinician in a much more dynamic way. I say I'm the blue collar approach to self care.
Yeah.
I look at the body, know how the body moves, and I have this innate ability to go, okay, here's what we need to do, here's how we need to do it, and people move better.
Yeah.
And he goes in there and goes into all the science that everybody wants. He breaks it all out. He's a geek, and Kyle, if you ever hear this, you are a geek, and I love him for it. But now I get to look at everything in a different way. So, when you ask me about some of the competitors of the past, I don't have anything to prove anymore. I love each and every one of them for their responsible role that they take in this world of self-care.
Yeah.
So
I just had this image of you, blue collar, like back in the day. If you took another track, it would be like The Body Mechanic by Cassidy Phillips. Outside of in a garage, right?
Yeah. Well, all we got to do here is pull this thing off here, and you'll be fine. It doesn't sell very well.
Somewhere in Texas it will.
Yeah, true. But talking about the industry, every 7 years, these things regenerate themselves, and much like the yo-yo. And if you take traditional business, and I do want to say I don't have a formal education. I have just been able to be a geek of my own on biomechanics and all that kind of stuff, and grow a global company. So all you people out there that do have dreams of doing that, do it. Don't let anything stand in the way of you pursuing something that you're truly passionate about.
Amen.
Now, as for the industry, I think that you guys are actually going to see that stretching is coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Not sedentary stretching.
Right.
People are looking for mobilizing tissue and then moving it.
Right.
And moving it in a supported way is what I call stretching, what stretching's supposed to be.
Right.
And so I think that the industry has to go back to some of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm challenged because there's so much noise in the marketplace today.
Yeah.
Because of the internet. and it's hard to know who's doing what, where, and when and how. And I mean, there are people that are over talking most of the people that need the help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have to, as an industry, strip away the complexity, look at the simplicity, and deliver that to the masses.
Yes. Amen. Totally agree.
Because those are the ones that there is a happy, healthy person in every individual that is overweight.
Mm-hmm.
There is a happy, healthy person within all those that are depressed. We just got to get to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, there's a lot of judgments out there in the world today with a lot of new federally regulated decisions in the world. And it's interesting. I'm a Christian, and boy, do we get beat up for having beliefs. And for me, being a Christian is I don't get the chip to judge anybody about anything.
Yeah.
That's it. Simple as that.
It's easy.
So it's the easiest path to take. So when I look at the industry and I look at all those that are in need, don't judge anybody for what they look like, because everyone is pursuing a better lifestyle. Everyone deep down inside wants a better life. They want to live longer. They just may not know how to communicate it.
Right.
And we really gotta tap into that. The industry itself we're going to continue to take a more holistic approach to self-care.
Nice. I like that. Well, I was going to say thanks for your message of hope, because really, I find, like, with what I do and with my wife and what you do, you give people hope when you restore movement where people gave up.
Yes.
That's your personal story. You're able to return to a so-called normal life, whereas before it was anything but.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people that have, similar type of stories, not the same stories as you, but different stories that we can appreciate, as practitioners.
Yeah.
In trying to help people. So thanks for that message of hope. And along those lines, drawing the interview to a conclusion, where would therapists or trainers go to get trained in your system?
Go to tptherapy.com.
Okay.
And I think here in the next few weeks, we're launching a new online portal that I hear is spectacular.
Okay.
We've got online courses now as well. I always recommend a live course. But go to the website and find it there. We'll be at Idea World Conference next week. If anybody listening's there, or it'll probably be posted after the fact. There's one thing, Chris, that you hit that I want to touch on for a second. Sure. And that is, I'm a firm believer in the body tells the mind to do incredible things, and the mind tells the body to do horrible things. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that can't get their brain out of the way.
Yeah.
And what you've done, you and Ann, two incredibly passionate people. You guys get incredibly passionate people together. Everybody that does the Stretch Away programming they are fans. They love you guys. And, I think I see a lot of Sue Hitzman, a lot of the people that take her courses, they feel the same way. Man, they can form an opinion real fast, which good for them.
Yep.
Good for them, because they found something that works.
Right.
And, man, at the end of the day, we're here to inspire those that are in need of better movement.
I love it.
Or a better quality of life.
Love it. You just can't knock anybody who feels better because they did something.
Yeah.
Given that it's not drugs and medication.
Yeah. And that's our responsibility. If once again, it's it's so true. The body tells the mind to do incredible things. You can go out for a walk and feel better. You can have somebody believe in you and you can feel better. But until you do something with that belief, you don't believe it yourself.
I couldn't.
And so I just hope that you know, I understand that practitioners are the ones that are primarily listening to you and following you, and we're all here to act independent yet as one. We're all here to create a better opportunity for those that are in need of a better life. And I'm just thrilled to, after so many years, still be in contact with you and see that you're growing in ways that, you know, I knew you was taking care of all the NFL teams.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got all these practitioners, you know, going out into everyday worlds,
Mm-hmm.
educating people on better ways to take care of themselves and to work on them to even be able to take care of themselves. So it's congratulations.
Well, thank you, and congratulations to you. I couldn't end it on a more hopeful, inspiring note. Again, I'm here with Cassidy Phillips, creator, inventor, entrepreneur, TriggerPoint Performance, and it was a great speaking with you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your heart with us. Just really heartfelt in terms of how you feel about things, and your dedication to helping others is something to be admired, and it's very inspirational to me as well as anyone who's listening, I'm sure. So I'm not going to say goodbye. I'll say see you later. To be continued, because there's a lot.
Be continued.
Yes, there's a lot of things I'd like to talk to you about, but I think we have a lot of things to go on with TriggerPoint tools, and I did the training. I'm going to say to you listeners that Ann and I have done the training with Cassidy. We've followed Cassidy and his work. We believe in his tools, and we're going to actually recommend using his tools in our second edition of the Stretch to Win book. So where can they get your stuff?
Man, you can get it everywhere now.
Yeah, but if they just go to TriggerPoint,
you can go to TP Therapy, you can go to Amazon, you can go to
everywhere.
Dick, Sports Story Academy, your local running store. We love local, so
awesome.
Go to your local, running store. They've got product. Yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy. You can get it a lot of places.
There you go. Well, thanks so much again, Cassidy.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Till we meet again.
Yes.
Take care. Bye-bye now.